So perfect timing. We're just getting clarity on the back and forth that just happened about an hour ago, started about less than an hour ago. So we had reports of explosions in southern Iran, and then we had reports of Iranian missiles fired targeting 4 ships. We don't know if they're commercial ships or American warships. And now we got reports from Iran that the explosions that were heard there were around Bushehr where the air defenses are intercepting hostile aircraft. Now, it doesn't mean they were actually the air defenses. Maybe they were struck and they don't want things to escalate. And they're also claiming they shut down 1 Reaper drone. So we haven't heard anything on the American side so far, but we know there were explosions in southern Iran in retaliation with missiles fired, apparently as a warning shot against 4 vessels. We don't know if they're warships or commercial vessels. And we had something similar happen yesterday. There were, I think, drones fired at one of the ships that was passing without getting authorization. And the U.S. responded by striking Iranian targets, and then the Iranians fired a missile and drones at Kuwait. The UAE breathed a sigh of relief. It's Kuwait this time. Before we get into the peace deal, we're kind of all linked together. So I'd love to get your analysis of what just happened now and your analysis on everything.
Well, first of all, Mario, you're right that what we're seeing today is not different than what we've seen over the last several days. The backdrop is that the Iranians are trying to maintain the status quo ante.
And the United States essentially too.
Until such time as there is a deal that would open the strait. And so that means if there are ships going through that they have not proved, that they're firing on some of those ships to maintain their leverage. And the response to the Iranians firing on the ships is that the Americans are firing on the Iranian missile positions. And the response to the Americans firing on the Iranian missile positions is the Iranians have had some strikes on Kuwait, on a U.S. base in Kuwait, and perhaps on some U.S. is contained. You'd call it skirmishing. It is not considered by either side sufficient to break the negotiations. It is not considered by either side sufficient to break the ceasefire. And that the big news here is not about the military strikes that are straining the ceasefire, though, of course, anytime that happens, it's newsworthy. The big news is that the United States is still trying very hard to get to yes on some form of memorandum that would open the strait after several months of it being mostly impassable by most ships with great consequence economically for the region and the world. So that's the backdrop, and that's why oil prices aren't much higher now, despite these military strikes. That's the reason why most of the focus diplomatically, especially in Washington, has been on the potential to start opening negotiations in a more serious way.
All right, so there's so many questions because there's so many unknowns. First, are we even close to a deal? Second, is it?
Yeah, but I feel like Vance wouldn't be any better. Oh, but it's not that he would be better. It's Democrats have hated Trump since forever, and they'll just impeach him automatically because of the hatred of Trump. It's called Trump derangement syndrome. And the reason they won't do anything about Vance is he hasn't committed an impeachable offense. He hasn't started a war that crashed the global economy without approval from Congress. So we'll get Vance. It's crazy. This will will be at least another year before anything happens. Impeachment isn't a fast process, and Democrats only get sworn in like January after the election, and so probably an entire year if it goes through. It'll be messy.
Sure, you think that Trump and Mujtaba are the only ones that need to approve it now? What about the reports that a deal was approved 3 days ago, and they're just waiting to announce it? But more importantly, what's in those deals? Because on the American side, it's like there's going to be freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. No one's going to get any fees. On the Iranian side, we're like, hey, we're going to have fees on the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to charge a fee with the Persian Gulf Straits Authority, I think it's called. And then we have also the assets to be unfrozen. Apparently, there was a meeting in Qatar that apparently went well, where Iran is seeking to unfreeze at least 12 billion, if not 24, maybe in 2 tranches, 12 and 12. So there's a lot of conflicting messages. How do you try to make sense of all this?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up the Qatar meeting, because the American position is that's between the Iranians and the Qataris, and we have nothing to do with it. That would be quite some coincidence. The Iranians demand to be paid if they're going to open the strait. The Americans refuse to accept the toll system. They refuse to.
You were talking about how it's funny they're doing an environmental tax. Well, there's more than that. Apparently, he's explaining it right now.
To accept the system that is basically a toll system that called something else. But if the Qataris happen to unfreeze Iranian assets, and if they happen to put in place a humanitarian loan scheme that the Americans, nod wink, are okay with at the same time, that then gets you reopening the strait without the Americans directly putting out any cash. So pallets of cash are coming. The Iranians are paid off. It's not the United States. Trump denies that it's the United States.
Look at all the posturing going on behind the scenes.
Now, the Qataris are doing a lot of lifting here because, I mean, let's face it, this is a country that's taken some of the greatest economic hits, 30% of their LNG offline for years. And now they're the ones that are going to be thrown under the bus for doing a deal to unfreeze these assets that the Americans say we weren't a part of it, not it. And the Israelis are not going to be happy about that. So it's a tough position to put the Qataris in. But in service of getting the strait open, which is, of course, what everyone here is focused on, then there is a there. So, look, there's no deal until Trump approves the deal. And let's face it, there's no deal until the Iranians are prepared to execute on a deal. Having said that, you're not asking for the Iranians for much if you're giving them cash and you're trying to reopen the strait, and that's seen as a payment. And you're only asking to begin negotiations for 60 days on the nuclear file that Trump has increasingly shown flexibility on, changed his war goals in the last week. We can talk about that in a moment.
I'm pretty sure Trump is very unhappy with Netanyahu, but it's hilarious. He's in a situation where he can't say that publicly because, imagine what Asmongold would think. He finds out that Trump is furious with Netanyahu. Why? For getting into this war, this losing war, where he's going to have to surrender to Iran. It's like, Asmongold, but we're winning the war. No, it's he can't admit that we've lost this war, and so he can't get mad at Netanyahu publicly.
And Trump, of course, Trump is not happy about showing that he's losing, and he is losing. You
Exactly.
Know this, and that's
It's not he's losing; he's lost. There is no viable path to victory through escalation, through negotiations, or through stalling. All lead to a disaster for Trump.
why we see Trump continuing to foot drag. That's why Trump was suddenly bringing up, well, maybe we need to expand the Abraham.
But stalling is the way he stays viable the longest. He escalates, oil infrastructure gets destroyed, oil prices immediately shoot to the moon, and the global economy crashes, like a 36% crash in the global economy. That's what happens if all the oil infrastructure in the Gulf gets destroyed. The Great Depression was a 20% contraction in the global economy. You're talking about something nearly twice as bad as the Great Depression. Yeah, he's finished if that happens. He negotiates, he does a deal with Iran, which is surrender. He's finished politically, immediately. So he's just stalling, and it'll continue stalling until eventually the rest of the world will force him to do a deal. And in this video, I think he's getting there. The rest of the world is starting to get pretty angry.
Accords. And if the Saudis don't accept that, the Pakistanis don't accept it, then maybe I won't accept a deal. Now, does he really mean that? What's the purpose of throwing that at the last minute when we both know that with Israel's present government and policies towards the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, that is not a remote possibility. There's no...
This is Trump, basically asking the Gulf states to give him political cover to accept this deal. What he's asking the Gulf states is utterly impossible.
way that is happening. So why would he say that? Well, because if the initial deal is nothing, if it's just reopening the straits, but the Americans don't get anything, then what you have to focus on is what's the ongoing negotiation that looks like a win. And if nuclear is going to take a lot of time and isn't adequate, then going back to the Abraham Accords, which will also take a lot of time, and which was Trump's signature diplomatic victory in his first term, having him be able to talk about that and say we're engaging in that conversation, that looks like a bigger thing that you can dangle in front of people and not focus so much on the fact that you've reopened the strait with nothing to show for it. Nothing to show for it, right? That I think is why there's a lot of kabuki that has happened in the last week with, continued delay. And again, I don't think the story here is that Iran is attacking the U.S. or that the Americans are striking back against Iranian sites. That's all very limited. I think the story is you and I are having yet another conversation, and as of right now, the strait remains closed. As long as that is true, the economic consequences are...
How long has it been now since we've been on the verge of a deal? About 2 weeks?
Severe, and will be severe for a long time. And when you've got Trump saying yesterday, well, he doesn't care about the midterm elections. And one of the things that you know about Trump is that when he proactively says he doesn't care about something, that almost guarantees that he really cares about that thing.
He cares about the midterms elections.
Right? So he gets the fact that his midterms increasingly look like a disaster for him. And again, every day that Trump is punting on this straight reopening deal, however bad it looks for him, however he tries to spin it and contextualize it, that's another day that the midterms look farther and farther slipping away from him and from the Republican Party.
All right, so I want to go back to the unfreezing of assets. That's really interesting. So one of the things I speculated, I didn't get any this from anywhere, is that the way assets will be unfrozen will be in some form of debt, maybe a collateralized debt, something like that, that will be collateralized by the frozen assets. But I never thought it would be, I don't know why it just didn't click in my mind, the assets that are in Qatar will be unfrozen. There were rumors that Qatar will be sending, kind of offering a loan to, not a loan, I think some aid to Iran in that format. Now, I just looked up very quickly, and probably you know that information off by heart, but where Iran has frozen assets. Iran has about $100 to $120 billion frozen assets. Yeah. $20 billion in China, $6 to $7 billion in, I think Qatar only has $6 billion.
Six.
South Korea, 6, India, 7.
Is the 6. Oman has a bunch. Iraq has a bunch. There are a lot of
Iraq has 6 as well, yeah. China has the most. US only has 2.
And for the U.S. to unfreeze it would...
Well, obviously, Iran is adversarial to the United States. It would never keep its money in the United States, or it would... keeping its money in China, which is an ally, makes sense. So it makes sense that it has money stuck in more friendly countries rather than the United States.
Require congressional approval. So that is not a part of what we're talking about right now. And of course, that would be a direct American concession.
Yes, but in the grant, 2 things. Number one is Iran is saying we need at least $12 billion for unfrozen. Now and $12 billion later. If only 6 is coming out of Qatar, where's the other 6 coming out of? Other countries have to chip in?
Well, as of right now, the 6 is the only thing that I have heard that there is in principle, an agreement in principle on from the Qataris. I've heard talk from the Iranians about 20 to 40 billion. These numbers are very similar to the numbers that you and I were discussing 2 months ago about how long the Iranians would be willing to delay uranium enrichment. Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? You know, the Iranians were saying 5 years, right? I mean, they're tossing all these numbers around. The only number that really matters is what kind of a lump sum payment goes to Iran for reopening the strait, because there will need to be an economic concession. They are not doing that for free. It is not a giveaway, but the Americans do not want to be seen. They want implausible deniability that this is them. Now, let's also keep in mind, the interesting thing about the 6 billion Qatari funds is that this was money that was set to be unfrozen. It was in process before October 7th happened.
Oh, wow.
And
yes, I remember the discussions, yeah.
And then it wasn't. So there is a conversation that can be had that actually says...
And Iran had nothing to do with October 7th. That's funny.
As well, no, we're just resetting that in motion. That does have plausibility.
So there's more updates on the explosions that just happened. So I'll read those out in a bit so we can talk a bit more about it. I've got more questions. But just one more question on the unfreezing of funds. These numbers seem pretty much irrelevant compared in the bigger scheme of things. You know, Iran suffered allegedly $250 billion worth of damages according to the figures they provided, and they could make billions, tens of billions out of the fee out of Strait of Hormuz. What is $2 billion here, $6 billion there? What difference is it going to make to where Iran is at right now?
Well, I would not take the numbers of economic damages that the Iranian government is providing with anywhere near credulity.
Yes, they're overestimating the amount of damages. But it's probably still significant.
For one, nobody knows. Number two, they would exaggerate wildly. It's not just the Americans that exaggerate their numbers, right? Secondly, the ability of the Iranians to toll is not every country is going to go through and pay them. That's not on the table. That's the reality is that the United States imposed a blockade at considerable cost to everyone, including the United States, to prevent the Iranians from being able to achieve that outcome. So, and the boycott is costing Iran. It's not forcing them to the table as quickly as Trump would want, but it is reducing the amount of oil that they can produce and export. We're already seeing that the amounts coming out of Karg since the boycott are down significantly. So, I mean, over the course of another 3 or...
Well, that was during the first months, Iran was exporting records amount. So, of course, it would come down from that.
For 6 months, if the boycott was to persist, the economic pain that Iran would be facing would be very severe indeed. Now, they may not believe that the Americans are prepared to actually continue to keep that boycott in place. But so far, Trump has shown greater willingness than in the first months of the war, when he was actually allowing the Iranians to get their oil out and suspending sanctions, which I thought was a ludicrous move.
Me too. The most stupid thing, bombing Iran's supreme leader was the most stupid thing. The second most stupid thing was lifting the sanction on Iranian oil and letting Iran exports records amount for a month and a half at record prices, just building up this huge stash of cash. And now they can survive months of anything. It's like feeding someone a huge meal and then trying to starve them. If you just fed them, they're going to last a long time.
The medium and long-term perspective, all it did was keep oil prices low, but it improved the negotiating position of Iran, which turned out to be a very, very penny-wise, pound-foolish approach. The Americans have belatedly...
I know why the United States did it, because of chaos in derivative markets. They needed to keep oil prices down during those first few weeks of the war, and letting Iran export its oil was the price to save the U.S. financial system.
Move towards squeezing Iran, and that gives them less leverage. And therefore, it means that how much money they will ultimately be able to get. There'll be a lot more money on the table for Iran if they make good on the ongoing nuclear negotiations about the disposition of their enriched uranium stockpiles, and are they actually inspected, and do they get diluted or removed to another country? That would unlock money. Are they actually giving up on enrichment over a period of time with inspections? That would unlock more money. So there will be a gating of further economic windfall for Iran based on behavior. But my point is that there will need to be some form of initial payoff on behavior. But my point is that there will need to be some form of initial payoff to get this strait reopened. Iran is not going to do that for free.
Reopen with no fee. When you say reopen without Iran charging any fee?
Yeah, I mean, so what we've seen from the Iranian government in the past
Yeah, reopen with no fee, I think it just would be stupid on Iran's part.
24 hours has been statements saying that what really matters is not what's in the statement, in the memorandum. What really matters is the geography and who controls the strait. And that appears to be trying to pregame a memorandum that will say there is open navigation with no tolls, which is very different from what the Iranians had been saying heretofore. So if that's the case, and they're getting paid off by the Qataris...
That would be an amazing victory from Trump if he actually manages to get that. And it'd be pure stupidity from the Iranian side, personally, I think.
This is a way to kind of square that. No, we still have the right. We have the authority, but maybe we're not imposing...
Maybe pressure from China forced them to or something?
...that authority for the present time being as we're engaging in these further negotiations. That clearly, there are ways to square that. There are ways to square it that look better for the Americans. There are ways to square it that look better for the Iranians. And frankly, both countries are probably going to spin any memorandum in contradictory ways for their own populations.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised. I don't know, the fee one, charging a fee at the Strait of Hormuz. It'd be hard for Iran to walk it back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'd be very hard for Iran to walk it back, considering how they've not just said they're going to do it. They've created the website, created the authority, and just been proudly telling their peoples about it like it's a fact. Walking it back would be a pretty bad look for the domestic.
Maybe they vibe coded the website. Maybe it wasn't a lot of hours.
No, it's one of the optics of it. And 2 days ago, they said they're going to call it an environment. Yeah, and they're going to call it an environmental fee. So I'm like, okay, it seems to happen. I mean, they're going to charge a fee, but
you need an environmental fee, right?
Yeah.
Someone's going to pay for all that carbon, right? I mean, like
a security.
It's a carbon tax. They're kind of progressive, the Mullahs.
and security.
Appreciated. I mean, not on gay rights or women or anything, but definitely on renewable energy. I think that's nice to see.
Another thing that's concerning is these clashes. Now, I understand that, I've said it and you seem to agree, but I've been saying it for a while as well, is that that's expected during a ceasefire. A ceasefire can't be completely perfect until there's a permanent peace deal signed. However, there is a pretty big concern that this could escalate. A missile lands and hits a warship, wrong targeting, an interception that fails in Kuwait. Any of those things, if one event leads to a mass casualty event, then we could be back into a war. That is the big concern. Or one thing escalates to another. We saw that with Operation Freedom, Project Freedom. The escalation was rapid. Within 24 hours, we had missiles hitting Fujairah like it's back in wartime and alerts in Dubai. How big is that concern? How is that a possibility?
Project Freedom went very badly. And was immediately led to a climb down from the United States as a consequence. And frankly, made the other military options that Trump had been considering much less palatable in recognizing this could go really badly, really quickly. So I do think that the unintended escalation risk is always there, but it is lower than it was a few weeks ago. The strikes that you and I are talking about are relatively limited strikes, and they're not with advanced Iranian ballistic missiles. So in other words, they're easier to stop. They're easier to prevent, to lead to that mass casualty event. They are more akin to what we saw during the 12-day war, for example.
Yes, neither side is really fighting seriously. It's just very low level tit for tat.
So it's not that no risk is being taken. But I do think that both countries involved, the United States and Iran, understand that there is a level of posturing here to keep the leverage that both sides have roughly at parity until there's an agreement. I mean, the real movement that's happening here is on paper in the.
That's if the Strait of Hormuz opens again, then the leverage switches to the United States side, because that's one pressure point for Trump. The what's going on with the world economy and the stop flow of oil. If that changes, I mean, it's a win for Trump just getting oil out of the Gulf.
The conversations between the U.S. government and the Iranians, it's diplomatic. The real movement is not what's happening militarily in and around the Strait as of this week.
You said something when we first started the show. You said Trump changed his war goals. We can get back to that. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, on almost every front.
It was regime change was one of the goals. Of course, from reason Trump thought the war would be over in 3 days is he thought there'd be a regime change in 3 days.
I
the
think
objectives. Okay, got it.
his objectives. I mean, it's worth reminding our audience every time you and I talk that the Iranian people are getting desperately screwed here. These were the people killed by the thousands and thousands in January.
Yes. They've been screwed since before this war started by years of U.S. sanctions. Then currency attack by the United States against Iran that crashed the Iranian rial, led to the protests early this year. I mean, a huge part of the dissatisfaction with the government is due to economic pain inflicted by the United States on Iran.
When they were demonstrating peacefully against the Iranian regime.
Then they were not, some of them were demonstrating peacefully, others were armed. Trump is admitting to sending weapons to the protesters. And they were I think it was 600 or 800 police officers killed in their peaceful Iranian protests. And that doesn't seem too peaceful to me.
These are the people that Trump said that he would rescue when he started this war. He has said nothing about rescuing the Iranian people over the past couple of months, as we've had over 1 million displaced, as we've had thousands killed.
Because it's become obvious to everyone that there isn't this huge majority that's willing to rise up and take over the country, that the people against the regime are actually a minority, and there's no chance for regime change. That's why Trump isn't talking about it anymore.
As their economic infrastructure gets beaten to shreds, they are the ones that will suffer, and their regime will remain in place. Trump will not choose the next Ayatollah, as he said he would in the days after the initial assassinations. Instead, we've traded an 86-year-old Ayatollah for a much younger Ayatollah and a hardline group of IRGC that's running the country. This is not preferable for the Americans. This is not a Delcy Rodriguez trade up in Iran.
Oh, yes. Killing all the moderates and putting the hardliners in charge. Yeah, that was definitely not a smart move on Trump's part.
The Americans are no longer talking about ballistic missile restrictions. That is something that will be left for the regional countries to work out after a deal is in place. They're not talking about preventing support for proxies in the region. They're not talking about taking the oil from KARG or from Iran the way they did with Venezuela and the way Trump did in the first months of the war. Literally on virtually every war goal that Trump has set, he has walked back. This is a failure. It's an epic failure, and it's an epic failure that is not just affecting the United States.
Operation Epic Fury was an epic failure.
But it's affecting almost every country in the world. I speak to a lot of global leaders. I was just earlier this week.
Here, this part's really interesting. The opinion of global leaders. This is what I've been waiting for. This is what will eventually end the Iran war. Anger from world leaders.
In the Dominican Republic. And I was talking to the president of the DR, who's watched his approval rating slip down to 55% from the high 60s. And this is a country that imports a lot of oil, and inflation is going up, having nothing to do with his government, purely on the back of U.S. strikes and Israeli strikes on Iran. And this is a guy that basically, he's on the right, center-right leader, should have a pretty good relationship with someone like Trump. And what the United States is doing is undermining him. I'm having these conversations with European leaders on the left and the right, Japanese, Canadian, South Korean, Indian, you name it, around the world, Chinese. Everyone's upset.
Exactly. But that's only from the initial pain. The real pain that's going to hit in June, July, that's, oh my God, that's upset is going to go up a level, all these world leaders. And when all the world leaders get upset like that, start talking to each other, you're going to have a coalition formed to make Trump capitulate and get the straits open.
Everyone's upset. Even the Israelis are not happy. Bibi is not happy because they're going to be left with an Iran that is in place with much more capability than they're comfortable with, and with much more geopolitical leverage than they ever wanted to see. This is very different from what they did to Hamas or what they did to Hezbollah. And so, I mean, it's kind of staggering. I mean, look, it's not Iraq or Afghanistan level staggering because it's not war going on for years that cost trillions with thousands of lives lost. But I mean, in terms of the damage that one can do in just a few months, this is kind of unprecedented for an American president. You and I have never.
But it's only getting started. The summer, that's when the fireworks are going to come. July, there are fireworks in July.
Seen a U.S. president do this kind of damage in just a few months. It's really quite something.
What's wild is some people talk to me and still think this is a win for Trump. They say he's weakened the. No.
Asmongold.
I'm saying some people sincerely think that. And this is just crazy to me. I spoke to someone, an intelligent person, and they believe it's a win because, number one, they didn't believe the JCPOA worked, and they think now there will be a solution to the nuclear program. They think Iran's economy is collapsing, so they have no choice but to capitulate. They think Iran's military capabilities.
The person whose economy is collapsing, that's the global economy that's collapsing.
Have been destroyed. They think now's the opportunity, no joke, now's the opportunity to pursue the Abraham Accords because the Gulf countries need deterrence against Iran. It's wild that despite all this, people could still see it from a different lens. It's fascinating to watch.
I appreciate you saying that because it's always good to steel man these arguments. I would say
I'm not steel manning. There's not much steel manning to do, to be honest. I can't even steel man this one. I can't do it. I can't do it.
There are intelligent people that say this, but I mean, what I would counter by saying there are intelligent people that have decided, and they are roughly 70% of Trump supporters, that literally anything Trump supports, they will support. And they will support it because supporting Trump is more important than any of these other consequences. The fight that they have with the other side trumps all of it. And that is what it is. That's what it is. And so don't try.
Unfortunately, Trump has already turned to the other side. He's establishment on everything he's done internationally this second term.
Trouble me with the facts. This is Trump. I am going to support him. Right, wrong, indifferent. You talk about corruption? No, the corruption under Biden was much worse. No, it wasn't. Here are the facts. Don't care because I am on that side. And look, that is 30% of the American population. But it's almost nobody outside the United States. And that's 8 billion people. And one of the nice things about talking with you.
What? When did we reach 8 billion? I thought we were still at 7 billion.
Is we're not just talking to the American population. We're talking to the whole world. And I mean, when 99% of the entire world is saying this is a fucking disaster, it's possible that those 30% of Trump supporters are smoking something. Like, it's just possible that is it's political behavior. It is performative. It's not real. And I'm not willing to just sit and pretend that it's anything.
It's the mainstream media that is still running cover for Trump's war in Iran, and people like Asmongold just buy the bullshit, and they're still deluded. Asmongold doesn't understand we've lost in Iran yet. It's probably going to take much higher gas prices for that realization to hit home.
I want to give Trump credit when he succeeds. The Abraham Accords were a success. The Venezuela agreement, or the war and what's happened since then, has been successful. USMCA, which he now opposes, but back when he did it, that was a big win over NAFTA. No one is happier than me when the American president is doing things that are working. That's good. It's the most powerful country in the world. It's useful if they have success. This is not that, right? This is not that. This is the opposite of that.
Yeah, I'd even say that from a strategic perspective, it's more disastrous than Iraq and Afghanistan. From a strategic perspective, not financial casualty. From a standpoint.
Absolutely. Hey, Proton Stale, how are you? It's no big things have happened, just Iran firing some missiles at U.S. warships, the usual. Otherwise, we're still exactly at the same spot, which is Trump not doing an Iran deal despite having one on the table because he knows it's political suicide. And it's I still think it's going to be in this limbo for a couple of months, doing all right other than staring at the gas prices every time I go out. They going up? They'll go up. It's the U.S. strategic reserves runs out by the end of the summer, but even without that, stocks of oil and gas in the United States have been going down hugely. So there'll be higher prices already in June, but July is when they really go up. Fun. Well, let's get through the rest of this video then. we can discuss more.
That this is the opposite of that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'd even say that from a strategic perspective, it's more disastrous than Iraq and Afghanistan. From a strategic perspective, not financial casualty. From a standpoint of finance.
Yes, and the full disaster has yet to play out in terms of once the full economic pain of this hits, that affects popular opinions even more than it already has around the world. That it affects the politicians that respond to that public opinion. And it's a lot of people that don't focus on politics. Once gas prices reaches a certain height, like go up another 20-30% from where they are now, it's probably happened in June, they'll start paying attention. And that's not good for Trump.
For casualty figures.
In terms of U.S. influence
Or the
around
U.S.
world.
Yeah, U.S. influence around the world, the message it sends to the rest of the world. Iran's position in the world right now will change the region forever. Like Iran could...
Iran is ascendant. They fought the United States of America and basically won. There's a lot of it had a lot of advantages, such as its location, being able to control Strait of Hormuz, the fact that Trump, like an idiot, started this war with no real preparation for anything. He just thought it'd be over in 3 days, and so he had no plan beyond that. And military plans take weeks and months to set up ahead of time, and if you don't have a plan and you start a conflict, you're basically practically screwed. So he put the U.S. military in the weakest possible position going into this war with Iran. And that's another reason Iran won. But the rest of the world doesn't need to consider all those facts. All it knows is U.S. and Iran fought, and Iran won. Frankly, to me, it is obvious they did or have something. I don't know, but something. The United States have something? Like they did something to him, like Trump, like they have some dirt on him, you mean? Okay, let me put it to you this way. Maybe they have something that can influence him, but that's still not why the war started. If Trump had understood that this war, for example, wasn't going to end in 3 days and he'd be in this situation he is now, he would not have launched the war, no matter what they had on him. The basic fact is they got this war started. Maybe they also had something on him and that influenced his decision to start the war. But the main thing is they convinced him, 3 days, it's over, quick, done a deal. It's another Venezuela. That's how it was sold to him. And that's why we know he was telling people, like the UK Prime Minister, that the war would be over in 3 days. And that was what was absolutely key. They might also have dirt on him. That's possible, but just because you have dirt on Trump doesn't mean he's going to commit political suicide. Like, if he understood that bombing Iran's supreme leader would end his presidency, he'd go down as one of the worst U.S. presidents ever. His legacy would be forever tainted. It would really hurt the Trump brand, etc. If he had known all that, he would not have done the Iran war, period. He would have, no matter what type of it, because this Iran war is going to cost him everything. And the only way to get someone to commit political suicide that way is to trick him into it.
Iraq capitulated, we had troops there, the US had troops there, Afghanistan capitulated, they had troops there. Eventually it was a disaster, yes, the outcome was not there, the ROI was terrible. But in this case, it's just as simple as the US just lost and walked away. And it says a lot for the region, and also the way the region was treated, the way American allies were treated, will make a lot of other countries, you speak to world leaders around the world. Is it fair to say that world leaders are reconsidering their security strategy now?
Yeah, it is. It is not fair to say that they're leaving the United States. But when I look at India, they're going to spend a lot more money on European defense systems.
Yeah, about threats to his life, to Trump's life. That's complicated, and that can backfire. And if someone makes a threat to Trump's life, then there's so many different agencies that Trump would call upon to investigate it, and there's no way deep state controls them all. It gets complicated. I personally don't believe that. I mean about explicit threats, like stuff like the assassination, which is there's no official someone giving him a card saying we're going to kill you like this. It's just having a bullet fly by your head. It basically drives home that it's possible to kill him on that level. But again, we've heard that Netanyahu managed to trick him into thinking Iran is trying to kill him. And if that is true, then it's obviously that someone else is not also threatening his life. That doesn't make sense.
And they're going to integrate more with European defense systems, which means parts and training. And I mean, these are, generational systems. So it's going to be decades. It's not going to be just a couple years. That's money that won't go to the U.S. military industrial complex. That's jobs that won't be in the United States. The Europeans, same thing. The Canadians, same thing. These are costs. They will not be borne by the Americans in the next 12 months, but they're going to be borne by Americans over years and years and years. Now, if you want me to say something positive.
And that's why I've always thought this, the dollar's doomed to collapse, why it's a Ponzi scheme, is that I've watched the things that they've done to delay its collapse. It's always at the long-term expense. Like short-term, it boosts like tax revenue, like taxing Americans abroad. Just one example to throw out there. United States, only country in the world that taxes U.S. citizens living abroad. And that puts United States long-term in a horrible position economically, because your foreign citizens living abroad are your ambassadors of your businesses. They sell, the products of U.S. companies. They are your influence on the world stage. If you're taxing them abroad, you're making it more costly for your citizens to live abroad than the citizens of other nations. And in some places, depending on how the tax system works there, it's nearly unaffordable for Americans to live abroad, because if they're depending on the tax bracket. In short term, it's great. The U.S. gets a lot more tax revenue. Long term, it costs U.S. Companies billions of dollars in lost sales because they don't have U.S. citizens out there working on behalf of U.S. interests. That type of thing.
Positive about the Iran war. I have something strategically positive, which is that OPEC is over, and that's quite something. It is the end of a cartel, which means more competition and lower prices, and nobody wants a cartel for oil, except for the small number of countries that are producing. And secondly,
I do think that OPEC has been really weakened, but I think it's a little early to say OPEC is completely over. You don't know how everything is going to play out. We'll see once the oil is flowing again.
This is a thing that will move the world fast.
I will say that there's one thing is that OPEC for at least next year is completely irrelevant, because everyone everywhere is going to pump as much oil as they can. Just period, because of such a drastic shortage in the energy market. So in that way, OPEC is not relevant for the next year at least.
Faster to renewable energy. Everyone now sees that a relatively small number of rogue actors with drones can disrupt the Strait. And what you do in the Strait of Hormuz today, you can do in the Red Sea tomorrow. You could do in Malacca next year.
But switching to renewable energy, that means making yourself dependent on China and its rare earths, because that's what you need for solar panels and all types of the high-end renewable energy products. So how is it better to make yourself reliant on China than reliant on Middle East oil? That's just a stupid argument, but I'm sure some people will make it.
And that means that you need to move to electric vehicles and wind and solar and nuclear and renewables much faster. And so Trump...
No, because that'll devastate economies. Look at the companies, places like Europe that have done that, tried to force that, drastically pushed up their cost of energy, and now they're deindustrializing. It's a disaster. Your policies you're advocating, no. What you need to do is resolve these crazy conflicts. Like, if the war in Ukraine and Russia wasn't going on, Russian oil was flowing freely, this crisis in the Middle East would already be a much less big deal. It's the combination of those two things. Because the Russian conflict in Ukraine, it's not just hurting Russian export of oil, it's hurting how much Russian oil can be produced. Like, there's 1 trillion barrels of oil in the Arctic that isn't being developed because of the Ukraine war. And if the Ukraine war had been, Europe had put aside to that an end to that nonsense like 3 years ago, there might be like millions of barrels of oil flowing out from the Arctic at this moment. And the Persian Gulf wouldn't matter as much. But the problem is you start this big war in Ukraine and this big war in Iraq at the same time, then yes, it's a disaster.
Trump may not appreciate that, but Trump's invasion of Iran has done more to advance the green agenda than I have seen from any American president. And I think that's a huge win globally. The Americans shouldn't only be the most powerful petrostate. We should also be seeing much more movement towards post-carbon energy. That's the energy of the future. It's much cheaper at scale. The Chinese have already figured it out. The U.S. should not cede leadership to them. We will move as a planet much faster to post-carbon energy because of Trump's decisions in Iran.
I believe this is an global warming ideologue, and he's bought the mainstream propaganda on that topic. Yeah, renewable energy has its place, and if you build it right into your economy as you're going up, yeah, it can work. But right now, there's no reason to switch off from oil. It's still much cheaper.
And strategically, that's a very good thing. It's not good for the United States right now because the U.S. isn't doing any of that right now.
Yeah.
But long term, it'll actually be beneficial.
How will the region look like? That's a big question as well. I'll give you a few theories. Shrita Parsi was telling me earlier something interesting. He wrote it on Substack. He said,
like things like public transportation that is reliable and that makes more sense to be electric, for example, than because that you don't take your bus like a cross-country trip, for example, and it doesn't need. But if you're driving cross country, gas is just infinitely better than electric because you just stop at a gas station, 30 seconds you have gas, or a minute you have gas, you go again. Electric car, you have to. You find the right type of charger, and even if you have the super fast charger, it's far longer than that. So it's inferior for any type of travel, like long distance travel.
one thing he's worried about is that a way for Iran to deter future aggression after the deal by Israel and Lebanon, as they tend to do, is Iran could horizontally deter it again by striking Israeli ally, the UAE, every time Israel strikes Lebanon. So that's one thing. Another Brandon Weichert was telling me earlier today, he believes it's going to be like a tripolar regional order, where it's going to be Iran, Israel, and like the Sunni countries coming together. Saudi.
I have never done that, and okay. I guess it's okay to have your Christians are my enemy. Wow. You're aggressive. So, not a big fan of Israel on this particular stream, so it's... Well, that's not that bad. If you're talking about debating like ancient to what Jesus was or wasn't, that's not my area of expertise. So, yeah. I'd say specifically Zionists are the actual big problem. There are a lot of Jews that aren't really religious and aren't a problem. There are those too. Well, I can understand your anger, given what is happening in Lebanon and Gaza, etc. But just to let you know that Israel also did fund the genocide of 1 million Christians in Syria back in 2011. So don't think it's only Muslims that Israel goes after. Don't make that mistake. Well, I can tell you that the 1 million Christians in Syria were not what you'd consider white. They were very much like the rest of the Middle East. And so... I only like... Okay. I only like whites that hate all Christian sinners. Sorry, I think this is just curious. I think I might have to... Yeah, I think that's, sorry. This is a little too extreme for me, and it's telling me you're a possible band invader, so... Unfortunately, you're going to have to put an end to this. Yeah. Yeah. If there's somewhat... It's that type of thing just puts your Twitch channel at risk if this is really too far out there. Sorry. Let's continue. Yeah.
So that's one thing. Another thing, Brandon Weichert was telling me earlier today, he believes it's going to be like a tripolar regional order where it's going to be Iran, Israel, and like the Sunni countries coming together. Saudi, Qatar, Turkey, and Pakistan. So it's going to have three, Egypt.
Yeah, we're not on kick. You can't say that here. Yeah.
To Egypt as well, and he's not optimistic about this. He thinks a tripolar world leads to more instability, unlike a multipolar world. It's a concern he has. So it's like all these different theories. One thing's for sure is that it will.
I got someone on kick. I'm here. Got suspended on 1 week on Twitch. Sorry, I don't read the kick message that often. Let me get over there. Let me just write that. Sorry. Need to read kick messages more. All right.
Not look the same. It will never look the same. I'd love to get your analysis on those 2 points, but in general.
Yeah, I think that the latter is closer to the truth. I think that we have these emerging different blocks with the Saudis and a Sunni bloc with a closer alliance with Pakistan, nuclear umbrella, 13,000 troops, Air Force in Saudi Arabia. That is going to become a more coherent bloc, and they will be more interested in finding a way to come to a stable agreement to live with the Iranians long term, where the Israelis...
I agree with that. And Israel will try to torpedo that in every way they can.
The UAE with the United States are going to be much more focused on mowing the grass. And I agree that the deterrence capacity against Iran is more challenging when Iran can hit the UAE or Iran could potentially disrupt the Strait. Like, they don't need nukes in this environment to deter the Israelis and or the Emiratis, even the Americans, from engaging in strikes after what we've seen over the past few months. Now, the contrary, or should I say the slightly complicating view of that is it's not like the Saudis are going to give up their military relationship with the United States in that environment. It's not like Turkey is going to leave NATO. So the idea that a Sunni bloc is somehow a different pole from Israel and the UAE, I mean, the Sunni bloc is not going to join the Abraham Accords. They're not going to be happy with what's happening with the Palestinians, but they're still going to have a security anchor with the United States for the near future. And I think that helps to diffuse what would otherwise be an extremely conflictual geopolitical arrangement. Then there's the question of China. And the Chinese are clearly interested in facilitating and helping Pakistan facilitate a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia coming out of this war. China's going to buy a lot of oil that comes out of Saudi Arabia. I would counter by saying, go really badly. Who do you...
About China, they have been operating very quietly on the world stage. Like, out of the three big BRICS members, Iran, Russia, and China, it's the only one that's managed to avoid the open, outright confrontation with the U.S. It makes sense, too, since they're the strongest of the three. They're the ones the U.S. is least excited to go after. They have huge leverage in terms of control of rare earths, but one day China will have to get involved militarily somewhere. It's just a matter of time.
You need to turn to, it's those guys. So I think that, and, at the end of the day, the UAE is, you know it very well. The UAE is kind of a city-state. It's not really a regional player. It's kind of a global hub.
That would have been my...
What you're saying about, to me, it's always... One part of me, when I was researching all those years ago, was wondering, the transfer of our manufacturing to China, the outsourcing, I have to wonder if there's not some people that made deals with China to do that, because it's such a betrayal of America to have encouraged that. And if China isn't, maybe you can live out the rest of your life secretly somewhere in China and you betray the United States and outsource United States. Our manufacturing is our wealth. The manufacturing base of a country is the long-term wealth of a country. And those who outsourced it to China would definitely betray the United States. I just wondering if it was all just doing it just a tiny bit, just to bring down inflation at home, just like stupidity at institutional level. That's a byproduct of how messed up our entire system is, because our fields like economics are messed up in terms of how they evaluate things as a result of needing to prop up the dollar, like how we evaluate GDP as the measure of success of a country. It's like it's the same thing as judging someone by how much they spend each month, and that's how wealthy the person is. That's how we're judging countries. So if a country borrows a ton of money and just spends a lot, then their GDP goes up, and we say, "Oh, wow, they have a lot of growth." But do they? Just because they borrow and spend a lot? No. That if they can't borrow anymore, all that growth collapses immediately.
And Dome, they're being attacked more than anyone else.
They're going to keep needing that. As you said, they're going to keep needing that in this post-war environment.
But there's a question, there's a chicken and egg. Will Iran attack them if they're close to Israel? So they need Israel to defend themselves from Iranian attacks. But will Israel cause Iran to attack them more?
I know
where it gets
it's
tricky.
true, but I think if you're the Emiratis, what you're betting on as the Emiratis is world-class technology long-term. And the primary military power and the best technology power in the region is not Saudi Arabia. It's Israel. And after you've seen that there's the potential for things to go really badly, who do you need to turn to?
Yes, I think the deep state or whatever, like they're trying to do vaccine ID in the West, stuff like that. The social credit system they have in China, let's just say the deep state planners in the United States, they salivate over that. So I think they view China positively in that it already has the social credit score they want to impose everywhere else in the world. And they sort of use that things. Except I don't think that China's social credit score is as powerful in controlling people as people in the West might think. I think the fact that the Chinese population is complacent is because China is growing. It has been growing consistently year after year for so long. And as long as that is true, I think that even if they didn't have something like the social credit system, the Chinese people wouldn't be, demanding democracy in the streets. If you have a government that's doing a good job and has been doing a good job for decades, people actually would support that system overall. If there is a big economic recession or collapse and in China, then we'll find out just how good that social credit system it really truly is, because I don't think it works that well in certain conditions. Overall, there just hasn't been any political will for change from the public in China. And why I wouldn't, if I was in China, as long as our economy is growing, I would not be pushing for a new form of government.
To, it's those guys. So I think that, at the end of the day, the UAE is, you know it very well. The UAE is kind of a city state. It's not really a regional player. It's kind of it's a global hub, right? It looks, in many ways, it looks more like a Singapore. It's got 10 million people, only 1 million of which are Emirati. For the UAE to work, they need to be able to attract the best talent and tech, from all over the world. They need to attract tourism. They need to attract
U.S. on the other hand, yeah, that's one thing I have to say. A lot of people think about how great democracy is, but what really matters is the will of the people makes it to the leadership of a country. Now, if you have, let's say, a dictator type person, a tyrant, like they have in ancient Greece, that responds to the will of people, like the will of people want a certain thing and policy, and so he says, okay, government passes that policy. There's no democracy. There's no voting on who leads, but the leader polls the will of the people and generally puts into place what the people want. Then it's still, that might be better than a democracy where, let's say Europe, where the majority of people are anti-immigration, yet you have governments that won't do anything about immigration. Yay, you can vote for someone and choose who's in the government, but whoever's in the government is going to do policies that you don't want. Which is better? Having a government that does what you want, or being able to choose your leader? Because there are some undemocratic regimes out there that are fairly popular. Like Putin is the best example. Like 76%, like latest poll, support in Russia. He does what the people of Russia want. And yes, they also have elections in Russia, but in the West they call it. Still, it's an example of a strongman that is for the people and does what the people want. Versus we have democracies where the elected leaders do the opposite of what the people want.
Medical tourism, if you want to call it that, students, right? All of those things. It's very different from where.
But for that, doesn't that make peace and improved relations with Iran even more important than ever? So people with big money, would they spend $10 million in the UAE, knowing that maybe in 5 years' time war breaks out again? But if there's significantly improved relations between Iran and the UAE, I'm saying even more than before this war, that's probably the best way to create security here. You could change alliances, you can't change geography.
If they think that they could create that, I don't think they believe they can with this regime. That's why the Emirates.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's probably the best way to create security here. You could change alliances, you can't change geography.
If they think that they could create that, I don't think they believe they can with this regime. That's why the Emiratis were the ones with Israel pushing the Americans to keep going, and the Saudis were not. Now, if you're saying after the war is over, might we see a change in heart? The answer is, of course, it could happen. But it does feel to me like that the UAE-Israel lash-up is much deeper than just okay, thank you, now we're moving back. I think it's operational. I think it's about intelligence. I think it's about long-term tech, and I don't think you can do that by just being a little pregnant. I think you're going to be full in there. And joining the Abraham Accords was part of that, of course.
We haven't spoken about the elephant in the room, and that's Israel. Competing narratives.
Yeah.
Israel will sabotage these negotiations. They're going to escalate in Lebanon. And they're going to do all they can to not allow this MOU to happen, or even if it happens, sabotage it later. The other narrative is Trump is fed up with Netanyahu. He didn't let him bomb Beirut. Netanyahu, according to the leak, said he has limits. He can't influence the White House like he did before. Right. And him and his lobby don't have that same influence, that same pull with Trump after this.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's always that there's a conspiracy between everything, but I believe, yes, there is a conspiracy, but it's really a really small group of people. I'm not even sure Netanyahu is in that small group of people. I think, and I think his control over Trump was just Trump's inexperience in international relations and not having a clue what he was getting into in Iran.
Well, which one's more likely? Which one's closer to the truth?
Oh, definitely the latter. I mean, look, I'm someone that does not accept the idea that Bibi pulled a fast one and that Trump didn't really want to go to war. I mean, Bibi was one of the voices in the room. And he's been trying this out for many, many different administrations now. And he found a participating listener in Trump. But it was Trump's decision. It wasn't Bibi's decision. It
was Trump's decision. I agree. Also, you could tell that Trump wasn't manipulated into this war. Like, it wasn't a situation that he didn't want to go to war and Netanyahu forced him to. No, I think Trump, like Asmongold, was gang-ho. He saw people protests in that, yes, the CIA and Mossad engineered and the Secretary of Treasury set up by crashing their currency. But the fact is, Trump saw that. He watches Fox News 3 hours a day and convinced him that all he had to do was kill Supreme Leader and then he'd be a hero that, for first time in 47 years, brought freedom to Iran. His ego. And after Venezuela, Netanyahu came into town, said, we could do it in 3 days. And then, paf, Trump, he bought in, and he decided to bomb the Supreme Leader, not having a clue what he was getting himself into. That is honestly what I believe. Maybe Netanyahu has blackmail material on him too, but he was on board for this war, and he was tricked into this war in that he honestly believed that it would be over in 3 days.
Was the one that said, yeah, this is going to be a huge win. I just won in Venezuela. I've beaten the Iranians up before. I'm going to have like this incredible success.
Exactly.
And now that it hasn't happened and he doesn't have anyone to blame, he's pretty aggravated and he's going to squeeze Israel more. So once there is a deal, the idea that the Israelis are going to pop off and attack Iran without approval from the United States in a significant way, undermining this entire thing, I find is not very credible. I think ultimately Bibi's in a challenging situation here, and he may have bitten off too much. This could be the thing that, and never say this, he's the ultimate political survivor.
Yeah.
He's lasted a very long time, but it is getting, the walls are closing in on
Yes.
Prime Minister Netanyahu as we look forward to the upcoming elections in Israel.
Yeah, I'm in the I'm that camp as well. I've been saying for a while, Netanyahu bit off more than he could chew. But then when one of my guests told me, Mario, don't never look at Netanyahu in a silo. It's Netanyahu in the lobby in the US. Then they've got a lot more pull. Just look at what happened to Massi. And that got me thinking that maybe, I'm getting ahead of myself. And there's still...
Well, the Massi wasn't just the pull of the Israeli lobby. That was also Trump's pull. Trump endorsed Massi's opponent. It was, I think, even bigger than the Israeli lobby influence. Yes, their money made a big difference, but it was Trump's endorsement of Massi's rival. If Trump had endorsed Massi, I don't think all that Israeli money would have made a difference. Massi would still have won. Trump was by the deciding factor by far, and that's why his betrayal over Massi that stings. That really stings.
Significant influence. Joe Kent. I was talking to Joe Kent earlier today. He took it a step further. He even said, Mario, I think there's duress. Trump is under duress, and he could be feeling even threatened for him to do the things that he's doing. And examples will be like the mention of the Abraham's Accords. That has no way of succeeding.
None.
That has nothing to do with U.S. strategic interests. That's not going to help the U.S. It's going to help Israel. Might help the U.S. in some way, but that's before this war. So then why mention Abraham Accords? Why? Yeah, that's probably the only example I can give of something that...
It's Trump desperately... I mean, he's been saying bullshit stuff ever since this Iran war started. He's been saying we're winning since the beginning, for example, when we're not winning. And he's been saying that Iran, there'll be no tolls, they'll completely cave, they'll give us all their nuclear material. He's been saying bullshit all along. So what does it matter if he adds a little more bullshit about Abraham's Accords?
That questioning on how much influence Trump actually has.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mentioned why he brought it up. It's because, again, he's trying to make this look bigger than it actually is. This was a big success.
With Abraham Accords, it's not about the U.S. getting their oil. It's not about the U.S. benefiting in any way.
No, it's
not about U.S. doing business.
He likes talking about Azerbaijan, Armenia, Pakistan, India. It's like another, this is going to be the biggest peace deal. U.S., China on Taiwan. I mean, he wants this. He does not want to be seen as capitulating to the Iranians. And if all he's getting is a promise to do something on nuclear that eventually looks like JCPOA minus, less than the Obama nuclear deal, then he needs to somehow make this bigger. And talking this up is one way to make this appear bigger, but it's not going anywhere. So it's performative. It's smoke and mirrors. It's a branding exercise, which is so much of what Trump ends up driving on these issues. But no, this is not, I don't believe, look, the lobby in the United States is interesting. I'm glad you brought it up, because when we look at where the U.S. is heading post-Trump, and we're only talking about the Trump administration right now, but you know that most Americans under 40 are more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause than the Israeli cause. This is even true.
It's not even that. It's just a lot of Americans are just turning against Israel. Sometimes it's in context. You people that don't care about Palestine is that the people that aren't happy about this Iran war are not liking Israel.
For young Republicans, which is kind of shocking. You see Zohran Mamdani, the new mayor in New York City. I mean, this is a city where there are an awful lot of Jews in the United States, and yet he feels zero need to really pander to that population because the Jewish population in the U.S. has itself become much more divided. And the Israelis are seen to act like a bully. Americans root for an underdog, and the Israelis are the ones that are militarily...
Israel is the biggest bully in the Middle East, and they've been for years. Their attitude is, we need to bomb all you and to make sure you don't have any weapons like that. Even if you thought about attacking us, you couldn't. That's the type of thinking they have. It's not like people around them are allowed to have an army or be able to defend themselves. They can defend themselves. That means they could potentially attack Israel and hurt Israel. So we can't have that. So bomb them first. I mean, I'm serious. In Syria, when the Assad regime fell, what's the first thing Israel does? It goes in and bombs all of Syria's military equipment, just to make sure that Syria just could never threaten Israel, no matter who's in charge. I mean, they don't wait to see if the person that's going to be in charge is friendly to Israel or against Israel. It's, no, let's destroy all their military so it doesn't matter who it is.
Really dominant and seem uninterested in what America has to say. I mean, when you've got Tucker Carlson and other people like that, Megyn Kelly.
At the same time they did that, they also seized a huge part of Syrian territory in the south. Bombing the hell out of a country and taking their land, it's sort of what an invader would do.
Saying that Trump is acting Israel first as opposed to America first, that has resonance. It has resonance, of course, on the left, but it also has resonance among some on the MAGA right. And so I do wonder, like, if you are Israel, you have to not just think about the Jewish lobby around Trump and MAGA in Mar-a-Lago. you have to think about what the Jewish lobby looks like and is competing against in 2029. If you're Saudi Arabia, you like Jared Kushner a lot. You got him on speed dial. You paid a bunch of money to ensure these guys are aligned. They're happy. But if the Democrats win in 2028, Saudi Arabia think they're going to have great relations with them going forward? I don't think so, right? So the point is that you got to be thinking differently about the future of the United States for these countries. Bibi came out.
Ultimately, Western democracies is not very good at this, but it does work to an extent. The will of people does make it into the government to an extent. So this huge swell of anti-Israeli sentiment, it's going to change Congress. It's going to change politics in the United States. You can stop it to an extent with a ton of money into races, but you can't stop it completely.
And said we don't need any more money after this final defense deal 10 years out. That's an APAC was like, well, wait a second. Well, maybe we need one more 10-year deal after this because we kind of like the money. We're thinking longer term than Bibi, who might be dead or in jail by then. But look, I mean, Bibi understands where the political winds are blowing, and that is that the Americans do not want to be seen. Rahm Emanuel, Jewish American, right? Former mayor of Chicago, chief of staff to Obama, running for president, came out on Bill Maher and said, they do not need our money. They are an advanced industrial economy. They can pay for their defense. We don't need to be paid.
When did he say that? Just recently?
3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And Rahm is, it's harder for non-Jews to say it. For a Jew to say that, and Americans are like, yeah, why are we these are rich people. Why are we spending billions of dollars on them? We don't want to spend any money on the Ukrainians. Why are we spending money on Israel? Doesn't make a lot of sense. So, I mean, again, the winds are changing in the United States. When you don't want to support Taiwan because it's 10,000 miles away, you don't want to support Zelensky because he doesn't have the cards. The Europeans should do it. And the Israel.
And this is why the dollar is going to collapse, and the dollar hegemony is because people don't understand the reason. The dollar hasn't collapsed so far is because we've dollarized the world. All these countries around the world are using the dollar as their currency. And why do they use the dollar as their currency? Because we overthrew Iraq and made them use the dollar as their currency. We overthrew Assad in Syria, made them use our currency. Libya, Somalia, all across Africa. Then you have the Gulf states that have pegged to the dollar, which is the same thing. And all that, like Saudi Arabia pegging its currency to the dollar, that is because of our huge influence abroad. And part of that is we give lots of money to Israel, and that's a threat to Saudi Arabia. And to not be on our bad side, they peg their currency to the dollar. Well, if we're not giving money to Israel, and Israel isn't the huge threat to the Middle East it once was, well, maybe all these Gulf states will start pegging their currency to the Chinese yuan instead. Or maybe they'll just have their own currency. And what happens to all the dollars circulating in Iraq, Syria, when they decide not to use the dollar anymore? It goes back to the United States. And having billions and billions of dollars in physical cash headed back to the United States, what do you think that's going to do to the value of the dollar? It's going to huge inflation.
Israelis are like not many people, but they're incredibly rich. Why are you sending them billions of dollars?
Yeah.
You still want to engage with them on intelligence, sure. You want to be aligned, sort of in terms of Security Council votes that they get that you want to make sure you're supporting them or vetoing stuff. People will still do a bunch of that, but I don't think the U.S.-Israel relationship long term is going to look the way it has for the last 20, 30 years. So when you talk about the future of the region, we can't just talk about the Gulf and the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Iran. We've got to talk about Israel too.
Agree. Yeah. Last question is kind of a speculative question.
De-dollarization is going to be great for gold because that's one of the main places where that's going to be used as a store of wealth in the place of the dollar.
What can we expect to happen next, and what can go wrong? What are the things that could drag us into what you consider an unlikely scenario of war, or what we consider an unlikely scenario of war?
Look, I mean, I feel that we are much closer to getting the Strait reopened than at any point since the ceasefire was announced. So that's obviously a more positive position to be in. But I also recognize that I am talking about Trump, who can change his mind. And
I still think we have a month or two to go at the minimum before any chance for the negotiation. I don't think Trump can make a deal. It would be he already has record low poll numbers. How can he announce to the world that he's surrendered to Iran? Because no matter how he tries to spin it, if the content of the deal is Iran's not turning over its nuclear material yet, they're only going to discuss it, and they're going to be charging some form of toll that's not going to be called a toll. and we're unfreezing some of their money and lifting some of the sanctions. If that's the result of this deal, everyone's going to look at it. Hey, wait a minute. Things were better before the war started. We were. And why are we paying $5-6 for gas?
And will not be swayed by advisors if he gets angry or sees something on TV or hears something he doesn't like. And we're also talking about an Iranian regime with a supreme leader that is clearly playing a role, but is hard to talk to, and an IRGC.
And very anti-Israel, by the way, statement came
Very
out today saying,
yeah, of course. Man, it's on death.
I mean, Israel killed his entire family. Just saying.
Israel
It's the same, exactly the same as, hasn't changed from his father.
hasn't changed from his father. And the IRGC, which is hardline and we think acts in a fairly coherent way, and they did, they've reopened the internet, and so they're clearly feeling more confident, and that implies an ability to make decisions in negotiations that they can follow through on. That's useful. Not so good for the Iranian people that we're hoping the regime would start to crack. But still, I mean, the level of uncertainty and unpredictability around these two leaders, like, you wouldn't want to bet your house that this deal is going to come together. It feels likely. But, you're talking about Trump, who's the most unpredictable U.S. president, unconstrained U.S. president in history. And you're talking about a completely new regime that's battered and bruised and also fears that they're going to get targeted by the U.S. and Israel. Can't trust these guys because they'll break a negotiation at any moment, maybe. So, that puts a lot of uncertainty until the deal is done. And even after it's done.
The reason I never believed in this deal is even why it was announced, the day it was announced, I got two versions of that deal from two different sources. From first, the points I heard of the deal, it was entirely in Iranians' favor. Then I heard a different version of the deal from Israeli media, Channel 14, that was the exact opposite, that Trump wasn't giving Iran anything. Now, if the reports of what's in the deal are completely different on two extremes like that, well, yeah, there's no deal. Thanks for the follow.
Khalid Lee 1600.
WGC UNC. Nice to have you here, Khalid Lee. I'm sometimes not great with shortening and acronyms like this. See if I can get Google help. Oh, okay. Hopefully no one needs that. Oh, it means good uncle. Good. I'm feeling better. Good uncle. What's good uncle? Just catching up on situation on Iran, and I'm still not. I think there'll be a deal in 2-3 months, is what I think. There needs to be a huge amount of pain across the world, and then everyone would get together and pressure Trump to finally basically surrender to Iran. That's the short of it, how I think it's going to go. What's good with you, Khalid Lee?
Done until we see the ships actually going through the strait with military third parties in the region operating, demining, all of that. There's still lots of reasons to be cautious here.
Yeah. Ian, thanks for jumping on. Always a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, this was a good video. It'll be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Can watch our Kick Twitch, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. You don't think there will be a mutual deal with Iran and the United States? I do, but not yet, because it would have happened already. It's already been 2 weeks basically since they first announced this deal. It's political suicide for Trump to. Those people, Trump already has very low approval ratings, and the people that do approve of him and support this Iran war think the United States won. Now, if Trump agrees to any type of deal that to everyone it's obvious that the United States lost, then those who still support him will turn against him. The Israeli lobby will turn against him. They have a lot of power. And mainstream media will turn against him because the only reason they're giving him cover for this Iran war is because he's still in it. The moment he tries to strike a deal, the mainstream media will turn against him. And you're going to see the lowest approval rating of any president ever. He's finished. And he knows that, and that's why he's stalling, and he doesn't want to sign this deal. It's basically political suicide. He wants to go on pretending that we won the war in Iran. So that's what I think. I mean, even yesterday there was a guy saying that the U.S. had already basically agreed to outline a deal, but they were delaying to try to manage public opinion, which is Trump knows just how disastrous it will be for him to announce this deal. So I think he needs to be forced into it, and that needs pressure from the rest of the world. And so we need more economic pain for another month or two for that to happen. That's why do I think Iran won? Because that is what's going to... Well, let me put it to you this. All they had to do, I've said this from the beginning of the war, is hold the Strait of Hormuz closed 6 months. Democrats win Congress, and Democrats impeach Trump. Regime change in America. You actually have an enemy that the United States is at war with, and they have a viable path to causing regime change of the president that started that war. That is the position of power Iran is in. They also, the reason we can't escalate and just bomb the hell out of them, is they have, during the first 40 days of the war, without fail, anytime we bombed something like a desalination plant in Iran, Iran bombed the exact same target in one of the Gulf states. Without fail. When we bombed their oil infrastructure, they bombed oil infrastructure. And we know they have enough missiles to continue doing this, to level every oil facility in the Gulf. So if we go in and try to bomb all their oil, they'll bomb all the oil here. And just to give you an idea how bad that is, we could pretty much predict exactly what that would do. That would be a 36% shrinkage in the global economy. Because last time we used the amount of oil that without the Persian Gulf, the world economy was 36% smaller. Now, the Great Depression was 20%. And you're talking about a 36% contraction. That's like nearly twice as bad as the Great Depression. And if Trump starts a war that causes something that bad economically, he'll go down in history as like one of the worst presidents ever. And he'll be a lame duck for the rest of his presidential term. He's finished politically. So he can't escalate his way out of it. If he waits, he just waits and does nothing, twiddle his thumbs. I said 6 months, Iran's already won. The amount of damage from the closure of Strait of Hormuz for 6 months is enough to tank the world economy. Nowhere near as bad as 36%, but maybe 10%, 12% shrinkage in global economy, combined with higher gas prices at the same time. Stagflation, which is a horrible thing. And if he agrees to a deal, he's painted himself in this corner where he's told everyone that he's won this war, that he's going to get all these things from Iran. And if he gets none of those things, what do you think Americans are going to think when they're paying $6, $7 gas over the summer for that? They're paying that high gas to have fought a war in Iran and accomplished nothing. I mean, what has the United States accomplished in Iran? To give you an example, we failed at regime change. Well, they had already offered everything in terms of nuclear issue. So anything we get is going to be just as good as they were offering before the war started. So there's no advantage there. We're not going to be doing anything about the ballistic missiles. And we know that like 70% of those survived. We've lost like 13 or is it 16 like U.S. bases in the Middle East from because Iran's targeted them and they're badly damaged to completely destroyed. All these bases right here. It's just... What have we now? And now the Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, so everything is worse. I think no one won; they both lost. And is that reasonable? Well, no, because now Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, which is hugely important, and they're going to get a lot of money from that. They're discussing this video, like for charging a toll, they're going to make enough money to completely reconstruct all the damage done in the war, and more, and from being able to charge a toll. You have Iran that's been in a war with the United States of America, and they didn't lose. That in itself, it's like if you compete with an Olympic athlete and then you tie them, I'd say that's a victory for a person who tied the Olympic athlete. There's no way Iran should have been able to beat the United States or survive, but because we started this war in the worst way possible, which is underprepared. We thought it'd be over in 3 days, so we had nothing ready for if it wasn't. And to give you a perfect example of that, You know that blockade Trump has put into place. Let me ask you, what makes more sense? Trump bombs the Supreme Leader, then he puts that blockade in place right away, day one after bombing the Supreme Leader. Then situation 2, Trump bombs the Supreme Leader, lets Iran export record amounts of oil at record prices, build up a huge buffer of cash. Then, after a month and a half, we put the blockade in and to stop the oil from going out. Which do you think of those two do you think is more effective? Putting on the blockade right away to starve them and start hurting the economy right away. Yeah, but we didn't. Why? Because we did not prepare for this war. Trump thought it'd be over in 3 days. We needed a month and a half to get the Marine ships into place, to get everything ready to be able to do that blockade. And that's bad planning. It really honestly would be a completely different situation if that had been ready day one. It would have put Iran in a much worse position than it is right now, and we'd have a much stronger position in negotiations, and that's just a tactical blunder, a strategic blunder. It's another evidence that we just stumbled into this war without knowing what we were doing. So that's why I say we lost. The leverage is on Iran's side in general, and they're going to come out of this conflict. Everyone's going to be much more afraid of them. And right now, by holding the Strait of Hormuz closed, they are establishing deterrence. That's another reason it's good for them to hold the Strait of Hormuz closed, and the longer they hold it closed, is they're inflicting a cost on the world economy, and no one is going to dare attack them again after this, because they're going to be... Japan, it didn't care at all what was going on in the Middle East and about attacking Iran. Now it cares. If it even hears a hint of another U.S. president thinking of attacking Iran, it's going to start intervening immediately to try to shut that down. Same for all the other countries. The entire world knows how much Iran can hurt the world economy. And they are going to be... I don't think Iran ever gets attacked again after this. I'd say that's a pretty big victory for Iran. So that is why I think Iran won. It's going to come out of this with more than it had going in. And the United States is going to come out of this with less than it had going in. Also, Trump, the one who started this is probably going to finish him politically, unfortunately, because we haven't even begun to experience the pain from the closure of Strait of Hormuz. That's going to hit over the summer. June, July, August, when the reserves run out. And even if there's a deal right now, it's going to be a nasty summer. Nothing is going to be fixed by the end of it. And that's the pain from all that. All the anger around the world is going to be directed at Trump. And there's also the damage from what he's going to have to agree to end this thing. It's a good chance he gets impeached for this. I think it's more likely than not that Democrats win the midterms and he's impeached. If you start a war, fail to accomplish any of your objectives, and then get impeached for that same war, yeah, I think it's, honestly, I say this as someone who has voted for Trump before. I think that his decision to bomb Supreme Leader is the most, costly mistake of any president ever. In terms of, I can't think of anything comes close. Maybe some history buffs might be able to, but I can't.